All right. My hair is sticking up. How we doing, everyone? Welcome to today's live, Friday, March 7th. How we doing, everyone? If you guys are watching this live, give me a holler. Let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from. If you are watching this live, and if you're not watching this live, then you're just gonna fucking watch it. You won't be able to interact. But if you guys are watching this live, I would love to hear who's tuning in, who's watching this, guys. Let me know who is here, who is witnessing this, who is watching this shit. Today's YouTube live, you guys. Oh, my hair. What is going on? That's better. Got to pat that shit down. Okay, guys. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of energetic extraction, energetic siphoning, hooking into other people energetically. We're going to talk about why men siphon women's energy, because I think this is a really, really big thing, right? Just men trying to siphon sort of sacral energy from women, or siphon from her oracle. Men can obviously be extracted from women as well. This is not like a one-way street. This is just ways men and women, ways the masculine and feminine interact, ways that our trauma interacts, all these different things. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. A lot of unclean sacral energy, energetic extractions, siphoning energy, hooking in. If you guys have any questions or anything you want to ask in terms of energetic extraction, hooking in energetically, unclean sacral energy, men hooking into women, women hooking into men, feel free to drop your question, your comment in the comment section. Anything that you would love me to sort of riff on, talk about, whether it's a specific question or just something that you're curious to know more about. Before we get into it here, I wrote some things down because I feel this is like kind of, I don't usually write anything down, but this is pretty incredibly complex, I would say, with a lot of sort of nuances. And I'm going to have to sort of drop in here and sort of channel a little bit to really be able to say what I want to say in the way that I'm trying to say it. Okay. So you guys, if you have any questions, anything you want me to talk about, please feel free to drop your questions, your comments, areas of interest in the chat section. And even if you post it throughout, because I say something that spikes something of interest, I'll see it whenever I'm able to see it, depending on what's kind of coming through, and then we can kind of get to it. Okay, so someone did send through a question, which I'm going to kind of bring forward, but I think the place that I wanted to start, is, okay, what does it mean when a guy is where I wanted to start this is, what is the opposite of energetically hooking into someone? Okay, so we think energetic extraction, we think energetic hooking, we think energetic siphoning, right? And I'm curious, for anyone watching, what would you say is the opposite? So we're thinking about energetically hooking into someone, energetically siphoning energy. Energetically, we're trying to extract something from them. If you guys want to put in the comment section or the chat section, what would you say is the antithesis to this, or the opposite to energetic siphoning? So if you guys feel like engaging, if you don't feel like engaging, it's okay. I'll just continue talking, but I thought I would just put that forward. What is the opposite of energetic siphoning? Because I think that's a really, really good place to sort of move into this, right? So no one going once, going twice. All right. So the opposite of energetic siphoning, extraction, hooking is energetic sovereignty. Energetic wholeness, right? So we got extraction, we have hooking, we have siphoning energy, and on the opposing end, we have sovereignty, right? And sovereignty could have a whole bunch of other synonyms. It could be wholeness, it could be power, it could be clean energy, energetic hygiene. Like when we think of someone who's really, really sovereign, their energy feels really, really clean, right? They feel really maybe confident, a very sort of practical way. A, a, they feel sure of themselves. They feel confident. They have high self-esteem. They really trust their reality. They trust their level of competency to be able to, this is what I want to do, and I trust my capacity to create it. And so and this is the way that I'm going to enter into this. When we think of, and I'm probably going to begin to channel a little bit to be able to get this through in the way that I want to get it through. So when we think of energetic sovereignty, which is the antithesis of extraction and hooking, energetic sovereignty, the way that I'll relate this to a man, when we're talking about maybe a man struggles with his sovereignty, some words that might come up when you think of a man who struggles with his sovereignty is he feels really unworthy, right? He lacks confidence, he lacks self-esteem, whatever it might be, that he is not totally sure of himself and his reality, right? And so if I could break this down somatically in a guy's body, it's almost like you get to the waist and it stops. It's almost like you get to the waist and it stops. And so when I say we get to the waist and it stops, it doesn't mean that he's going to be completely disconnected, but it means there's a real lack of integration from a root and a sacral point of view. And oftentimes the root begins to open, which supports the opening of the sacral. The root and the sacral really, really work together in terms of opening, right? And so when we're thinking about a man, who extracts a lot of energy, and I'll tell you that a man who is extractive, he's going to extract from other men and women. He's going to extract from other men and women. It's not just going to be a one-way street. He's going to extract from other men who he deems more powerful than him, and he's going to extract from women who maybe have a lot of gifts, have a lot of energetic power, have a lot of radiance. So it's going to be sort of a twofold, right? And so where he's sort of pulling from in the energetic body is sort of like the stomach or the waist is stuck, right? The stomach or the waist is stuck. And what this really means for a man is his depth of consciousness is not really solidified. He's sort of wavy and really movable in his consciousness, right? So a lot of times what women are vetting for is what's the depth of a man's consciousness? What it really means is what degree and level of truth comes through him, and what is his capacity to live, embody, and execute on that truth inside of him through execution, action, and integrity, right? So that's ultimately, anytime a woman is playing games, what she's vetting for his depth of consciousness. She's vetting for his depth of consciousness, right? And so when a man is very extractive, he's going to be a little shaky in that depth of consciousness. And what that ultimately means is that the reality that he inhabits and the reality that he leads is not going to be sovereign. The reality that he inhabits and the reality that he leads is not going to be completely sovereign. What it ultimately means, at some level, he really doesn't trust himself. At some level, he really, really doesn't trust himself, right? And so he's sort of energetically stuck at his waist, right? So you can just imagine the energy sort of holding in the stomach and the waist. Maybe it's holding in his bladder. Maybe it's holding at the base of his spine, and it's not really able to move. And so you can imagine when a man is in that space, he becomes more malleable and he becomes more adaptable. He becomes more malleable and he becomes more adaptable, right? So ultimately, what it means is he doesn't trust himself and he doesn't feel worthy to ground his energy deep down in his root, right? So that energy that's holding in his stomach, that's holding in his bladder, that's holding at the base of his spine, that's holding in his sacrum, that's holding in his tailbone, it wants to move and be released out his feet, right? So when energy moves and it's released out our feet, the new paradigm comes. The sovereign container expands. You can imagine the image of maybe a man's hips or expanding out, or the earth is beginning to widen, deepen, and expand around him, right? And so what happens When a man's energy is really stuck in the sacrum, it's really stuck in the tailbone, it's stuck in the root, it's stuck in his bladder, it's stuck in his stomach. Um, so the sacral energy is right below the belly button. It's, pressure on the bladder. He's not able to drop his energy down. What's going to happen now is this man picks up a lot of information. He's picking up a lot of information. So imagine when a man's energy is stuck in his waist, he's picking up, he's taking in a lot of information. Ultimately, he's trying to find somewhere to hold on, somewhere to kind of plant him down, somewhere to, again, because his energy stuck sort of at the waist. Really, what it is a man's connection to his lower chakras. That he's stuck there, that he doesn't really quite have anything to latch onto. So he becomes really movable, really malleable, sort of like this, right? Where he's changing his mind, he's changing his course, he's unsure of himself, he doesn't trust the reality that's sort of trying to break through. And so the two tracks that are going to happen, he's going to extract from women, he's going to extract from men. Typically, what will happen with these types of men, how they extract from other men is, maybe they'll begin to mimic what these other men are doing. They'll begin to take on a lot of information that these men are sort of moved into. And what these men will typically do unconsciously is they'll extract from men who they deem either more embodied or more powerful than them. Unconsciously, even below their awareness, they're beginning to sort of hook into the consciousness of other men. They're beginning to hook into that depth of consciousness of other men. It might be they pick up on their ideas or the consciousness that moves through these other men. They begin to sort of hook into it. And it's because their own sort of platitude and domain is really movable. It's really unsolidified. Either they don't trust it or it hasn't really been established. So it's really about a man's energetic foundation in his body, right? So we talk about extraction. Sovereignty is the antithesis. So when a man's stuck at the waist, how this shows up is he's going to find men who he deems more embodied and more powerful, and he's going to pull. He's going to have cords hooked into them, and he's going to pull different sort of information from them. Ultimately, what he's doing is he's pulling different threads and cords of their consciousness to try and have it of their own. I want you to think of like an adolescent who's trying on different outfits and doesn't really know who they are necessarily, right? When we're a teenager, we're trying on different outfits, we're hanging out with different groups, we start smoking weed, we do different things because we're trying to figure out who we are. So with men who extract from other men, which is one big part of this, is they're essentially men who are extracting from the consciousness of other men and they're pulling, right? And ultimately it's from a deep, deep cord that the root and sacral is really blocked. The root and sacral is really, really blocked. I would actually go to say that probably their root and sacral hasn't really truly opened yet. They haven't unearthed that trauma that blocks the root and the sacral, because even when the root and the sacral opens, there's still a long process of integrating it and moving through different layers of trauma and karma that's holding there. It's not like you just have one purge or extraction and now your root and your sacral is totally integrated. But there is like a really prolific breaking point when it sort of starts to open. And I will say that men that are in this extraction haven't opened their root or their sacral probably really at all. They haven't gone there yet. They haven't gone there. And so how it relates to men is they're extracting from his consciousness. They're like that teenager who's wearing different clothes and still trying to figure out who they are, right? And so what they're really drawn to, they're going to be really drawn to men who are pretty sure of who they are, what they're about, what they're trying to build, what they're trying to create. And that's going to be really sort of enticing, right? And so just what that feels like is their energy is going to seep into his space. Their energy is going to seep into his space. And what's happening is he's pulling tons of information, whatever it might be. You don't even really have to like have a significant sort of concrete idea of what he's pulling, but he's pulling something, right? And it's because the root in the sacral has never really opened, right? So now imagine what happens when this type of man interacts with women, when a man hasn't really opened his root or his sacral. Now, let's even stack this on deeper. Imagine this man comes from sexual trauma, or this man comes from a different form of abuse, or really big sort of attachment ruptures early in his life. The way I bring these up because those all related to root and sacral. So now we're compounding trauma, karma, energy that is stuck with a root in the sacral that hasn't really opened yet. And so what's happening? The reason why a man is extracting, because he's unconsciously trying to get a need met without actually getting that need met, right? It's deep in the unconscious space, deep in the parts of his body and his being and his cellular sort of tissue that is below his awareness. This is often happening below his awareness. He's trying to get some need met unconsciously, right? He's trying to get some need met unconsciously. When men are doing this, what they're actually doing is they're ensuring that they never have to receive. They're ensuring that they never have to receive, right? So you can imagine, say a man is siphoning, and when a man is siphoning your energy, he's siphoning from your sacral energy. He's siphoning from your radiance. He's siphoning from your femininity, right? And so he's siphoning that energy because he's trying to get some resolution with the feminine met without actually having to truly receive the feminine. So this is all happening in a below conscious awareness, an unconscious space. So, and maybe a man is doing this consciously, and if he's doing this consciously, it means that's probably ready to shift. If a man is doing this consciously, it probably means he's ready to unhook those cords, or look at those sort of forms of extraction, or look at those sort of impure connection spaces, right? So if this is becoming really conscious for a man, it means it's probably ready to shift. But when it's deeply unconscious, and this is just when a man's core trauma, and this could also be a really big ancestral block as well. This could be from the quantum space, the ancestral realm, but it's so far below his awareness, he's not even aware that he's doing it. And so what's he's trying to do? He's trying to get some sort of need met with the feminine without having to receive. This is not a great example, but like on a very surface level, imagine a man who's a sex addict. Ultimately, what he's trying to do is he's trying to resolve a wound with the feminine, but he's trying to resolve it in a way where he's like this, right? So a male sex addict is trying to resolve a wound with the feminine, but without having to be vulnerable, without having to reveal his unworthiness, without having to be seen, without really having to be hurt, right? All these different things. So the idea of siphoning energy is essentially trying to get a need met while you're at arm's length. It's trying to draw something into your space while pushing it away. So I think that sort of contrast energetically is really important. That's typically what men are doing who extract from women. They're trying to get a need met without having to reveal the core of who they are, right? Oftentimes what can really happen with men siphoning energy is it's a lot of unhealed resentment and aggression. And it doesn't necessarily have to be to the feminine, whilst it often is through the feminine. A lot of ways, men will extract sacral energy when there's a lot of rage and there's a lot of anger and there's a lot of resentment that hasn't been processed. And so the way that can manifest is I'm going to extract from you, right? Say the man had a mother who was really neglectful, completely neglected him. Maybe she abandoned him. Maybe she left him alone. She left him to cry it out. She left him to fight and fend for himself, when what he really needed was he needed to co-regulate with mom and know that she was going to be okay, right? And in those moments, those become breaks in connection with the feminine. but they also become breaks in connection with the sovereignty of our domain, meaning we can't drop. We can't drop, right? So now we sort of become severed. We become severed, right? We don't trust our reality. We gaslight ourselves. We're unsure, right? So when a man has a wound with the feminine, it also shows up as a masculine wound. A mother wound shows up as a masculine wound, right? Because when we have a wound with the feminine, it means there's some sort of stuckness that we can't move into our masculine sovereignty, right? And so much of our masculine sovereignty is the embodiment in trust in our consciousness, in how consciousness moves through us, right? So he could be living through some passive aggression, resentment, right? So, a lot of time men will mistreat women or, not be able to be devotional to them because they're actually dealing with a lot of past regression, a lot of unhealed anger towards the feminine mom, maybe something ancestral. And so that manifests as I'm going to extract, I'm going to pull something, right? And so now what happens is if we were to stop the extraction process, now we create this real fragileness, right? This real fragileness. So what typically happens when we stop extracting, we become really, really fragile. We become really, really fragile. We start to lose our identity. We're like, who am I? I'm a piece of shit. And now what that sort of extraction process was revealing were the ways that our sacral energy and our root, that tandem was not able to be clean, was not able to be clean. So a huge thing, for example, the way I can relate this, a man's sacral energy, the cleanliness of his sacral energy is actually going to it's going to be built into how he utilizes his sexual energy for his mission. That's really, really important. How he utilizes his sexual energy for his mission. So the process of a man healing this, of where he's trying to get to, is that his sexual energy or his sacral energy or his life force energy or his creative energy is able to flow into the penetration and the depth of consciousness of his mission out into the space, out into this space. And what you would consider for a woman, for example, her sacral energy is how does she open her body and her being to the unknown, to the greater universe, to be constantly in a provision of God, that she's able to move into her total radiance, her total delight, her pleasure, her turn on, her ecstasy, when she's all on her own, when all she can feel is herself in the world, right? So that's sort of the processes that we're trying to get to when it comes to cleaning up our sacral energy, right? So what happens is this guy, he's stuck, right? He's stuck at his waist and he keeps pulling and extracting, sometimes because unhealed anger and resentment towards the feminine, animosity that hasn't been able to move, sexual trauma that hasn't been able to heal. And he's terrified when I actually move out of that, I'm actually going to witness a level of fragility inside of myself. Because when you stop extracting energy and you totally feel your own energy, you are going to come into total union with your most fragile inner child, with your most fragile little boy or little girl, the parts of you that feel so unworthy. So you'll know that you're actually healing your extraction or your siphoning of energy when your deepest unworthiness and you actually feel like so unworthy and you feel so exposed and you feel so, who the fuck am I? That means that you're actually beginning to clear the sacral space. That actually means that you're beginning to clear the sacral space, because what's now happening is you're beginning to reclaim what you lost. You're beginning to reclaim what was taken from you. For example, for a man, this could show up as simple as a mother who moved too much into his space, invaded his boundaries, and didn't allow his depth of consciousness to form. This creates developmental trauma. This creates a mother wound. This creates an issue with boundaries, people pleasing. This creates where a man doesn't trust himself. He doesn't feel resilient. And what that can show up is a lot of unhealed aggression to the feminine. But what it means is the sacral energy is stuck. So when you want to think of a child, of like, how do we move into a clean sort of sacral energy? It's where our power and our truth felt totally safe to move through us. And that was cultivated and that was fostered. And it was a really healthy sort of balance of when does someone sort of step in and console and co-regulate versus when do we allow the child to figure it out, to develop a sense of resilience. And different things, like sexual trauma or different abuse, those become infiltrations that impact that space and impact that capacity for that sort of life force energy and that sexual energy to move through us, right? Often what happens is when we have sexual trauma and abuse, probably what we do is we have an entity that's stuck in our sacral chakra that doesn't belong to us. And that entity is probably hooking into other people. So most people, if you were someone who was sexually abused, and a lot of men that really, really siphon energy are probably going to be men that have some form of sexual trauma or some form of abuse early on. And that probably means they have an entity that's stuck to them in some way. And it's actually not them, but it's that entity that keeps hooking in. And that entity is trying to take and take and take, because that's what entities do, right? Entities try to take from the light. You could almost say that like an entity is really, really jealous of powerful people. It's really jealous of people who are in the light. So that entity is running course, right? So could be a good person, but if you have an entity stuck to you, that entity is going to invade other people's boundaries in the energetic space, and it's going to siphon energy unconsciously. This is why, as a woman, you might be like, I can feel his energy in my space. He has a hook into you. It might be that his entity is merging into your space. His energy is trying to extract your sacral energy. So why would an entity come? Why would we have an entity? Ultimately, what it means is that our power was taken away, and the entity becomes our way of trying to resolve or find a integration with what was taken from us. We're trying to think about like a narcissist is trying to resolve something, right? So when a narcissist is in a stroke of power, they're in a process of trying to resolve something, right? But they're not resolving it in a healthy way. When we have an entity on the sacral chakra, when we have an entity in our lower abdomen or on our pelvic floor, what it just means is that that dark energy is trying to resolve something. And what it ultimately means is we're trying to resolve when our power was taken from us. When we were at a time and place when we had no control, and we were vulnerable and fragile, and that purity was taken away. That purity was taken away. Because what we're trying to get back to, if God is purity, God is also fragility. Means that you're really tender, you're really open, you're really, really vulnerable, right? And that you're moving into a level of purity with your sacral energy of trying to find sort of that God consciousness in your sacral, that God consciousness in your sacral energy. And so if we have an entity there, we're trying to resolve it. And so we're going to take what we feel was taken from us. And that entity, that dark energy, is going to be the core origin, right? So if you have an entity stuck to you, it's actually going to be from the core origin of abuse. From however long it goes back in the family line, that core origin of abuse, that entity is like a nectar that's trying to feed off the light and is trying to take what was taken from it, right? So in order to heal the entity, we have to figure out the origin of where this entity came means where in the lineage was the first line of abuse. When we figure out where the first line of abuse was, we can figure out actually who the entity belongs to, and we can actually create a separation. And so when we have things like entities, or when someone is extracting a lot of energy, we're siphoning energy, because when that entity falls away, we have to meet the most fragile aspect of ourselves. And we actually see that as a threat, right? Think about yourself moving into the most fragile, unworthy embodiment of who you are, where every little flaw, every little thing that you feel is incompetent about you is on display. And now what happens as that gets revealed, and that gets revealed when you remove an entity that's stuck to your sacral chakra, when you heal sexual abuse, when you heal different forms of abuse, when you figure out where sort of the core place is coming from, a mother wound, a masculine wound, a wound with father, a father wound. But ultimately what it's doing is it's created an impurity. It's created an impurity where you're extracting, where you're trying to resolve something. You're trying to get some need met unconsciously without having to reveal the unworthiness. If I could explain this really, really clearly, the reason why we extract and siphon energy is we're trying to get a need met without having to reveal who we really are, without having to reveal how incompetent we feel, without having to reveal how fragile and tender we feel. Because when we figure out where that extraction is coming from, right? So the extraction, you guys, is coming from the root and the sacral. Somewhere in the root and the sacral, we're extracting. We're extracting. So it's usually like a sacral to a sacral extraction. It's usually a sacral to a sacral extraction, both for men to men and for men to women. It's usually a sacral extraction. So it's, imagine some cord below your belly button that's trying to like hook in, because when you stop hooking in, the fragile tenderness is revealed. Whatever is in the way of your power is revealed. And so here's the process that happens, right? When you figure out where you're extracting, your deepest unworthiness, your deepest tenderness is revealed, but now it starts to transmute, where now that deepest unworthiness, the fragility, the lack of worthiness can start to transmute into sort of this really clean and pure life force energy of whether it be your divine feminine or your divine masculine. A very pure energetic resource starts to come. A very pure energetic resource starts to come, where now you can more safely inhabit your domain. You trust yourself. You feel safer in your body. You trust more your capacity to execute and take action. And you're moving into a space where you move into this self-reliance in sort of your own domain. And what you're going to notice is that there's going to be a lot more really, really clean sexual energy that comes. A lot more really, really clean sexual energy that comes. And it's not going to be this energetic process where I want to go fuck this person, or I want to, whatever it might be. It's not going to be this neediness, but it's going to be sort of this gentle allowing of the energy to sort of flow and move through you. And it becomes this sort of real gentle allowing of sort of like a pure life force energy and a pure resource that really, really starts to feel holy. And now this energy can move and alchemize, and it starts to integrate with your crown. It starts to integrate with more of your other energy centers. And now you start to move into sort of a cleaner connection with the other energy. What might happen is you might reveal the ways where that energy doesn't feel clean. All the ways that you extract begins to become conscious. All the ways that you extract begins to become conscious. The ways where you're pulling from your own unworthiness or pulling from some form of avoidance inside of you becomes really, really revealed, and ways that you can't sort of utilize your own energy in your own domain to source. That all becomes really, really revealed to you. What you might notice is some connections that you were drawn to sort of energetically fall off your plate. Some connections that were in your space, and this is what you could call shifting timelines, but energetically, they just sort of fall away. They sort of fall away, right? And this is typically what happens when, um, you know, you had someone, say you're a woman and you had a man who is hooking into you, then you begin to just, he energetically falls off your plate. Maybe he tries a little bit, but you feel that cord sort of splintering. You feel it sort of changing. And so here's the thing, right? If men are siphoning from your energy, you are also complicit. If men are hooking into you, if men are extracting from you, you are also complicit in the exchange, right? There's something that you get. Usually it's some sort of ego posture, right? Oh, I feel validated, approved, or worthy in these ways. I feel validated, approved, or worthy in these ways from a projected fear of my fragility. Means I don't want to reveal, sorry, my fragility, my unworthiness. I don't want to reveal what's there. And so again, when a man is siphoning your energy or a man is extracting from you, you are also evenly complicit in the exchange because your ego is getting something. And so when our ego is getting something, and so someone asked me this question, how do you tell when you're hooking into someone? I'm actually going to, how do you tell when you're hooking into someone? I'm actually going to talk about this from a very practical point of view. You know that you're hooking into someone when you can tell the energy or the exchange is not energetically balanced. When you can tell the exchange is not energetically balanced. So, for example, say a man has the propensity to hook or extract. When he engages in a connection with a man who he deems his depth of consciousness is stronger, then he's probably going to begin to extract to some degree, right? In the same way, when he feels this radiance or this pure femininity energy, but he hasn't integrated his sacral, he's going to siphon her energy as a way to try to get something, some need met without having to reveal himself, right? Ultimately, the way this really, really heals, and so the antithesis of hooking and extracting is sovereignty and sovereign energy. It's also devotion, 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 right? So the question was, how do you tell when you're hooking to someone? When it's not energetically balanced, meaning you can tell there's some sort of power dynamic at play, or maybe you know this person ultimately could never meet you with wherever you are, and so you've created this energetic imbalance as a way to create sort of a, um, I guess I'll simply put it, you don't actually have to receive. If there's an energetic imbalance, you don't actually have to be seen and you don't actually have to receive. You can stay in sort of this unconscious to unconscious, like cord hooking sort of process at some level. And this is what happens in karmic relationships. Two people have hooked into one another to unconsciously try to get a need met that they're actually defending themselves against actually having met. Do you guys get that? A karmic relationship is when two people are unconsciously trying to get a need met while unconsciously protecting against that very need that they're trying to get met. So it's a pushing away, it's a pulling and a pushing. It's a pulling and a pushing. This is why like trauma bonds are push pull and twin flames are usually push pull dynamics. And so this process is we're trying to get a place of how can we be devotional? How can we be totally pure? How can we be devotional? How can we be sovereign? And so, a very practical way when it comes to relating, dating, relationships is really being honest, and a woman from her oracle, from a man from his true depth of consciousness. Is there an a receive and a reciprocate exchange here? Is there a give and a take? Can this person meet me? Can we dance on the same timeline? Can we dance in the same paradigm? Right? And for example, when a man knows that a woman can actually meet him, he knows that he will have to reveal himself, that he'll actually have to merge his integrity and his truth and the deepest parts of his body and his being with the fragile little boy that doesn't feel like he's worthy, that doesn't feel like he's enough. Those parts are going to have to merge. Those parts are going to have to meet and sort of dance. And when we talk about moving into like a really pure sort of godly consciousness, and we think of like when a man's depth of consciousness is really pure and really, really within integrity, really sovereign, it's actually when like his little boy energy has moved with it's when his little boy and the God in him dance together. It means you've touched on the most fragile aspects of the little boy, and we still found a way to be resilient. We've still found a way to work with that material to be utterly resilient and to be able to follow through and commit even in the face of that deepest material, right? And now you move into this place where your energy is freed up, right? Your energy is freed up, right? And now so many of your karmic patterns begin to shift, and you start to see things differently. You start to see the ways that you hook cords on other people, which shows, because again, if people are hooking into you, if people are siphoning from you, you're also evenly complicit in that exchange. And so for any women who are listening, are like, God, men keep trying to take my energy. Well, a part of that feminine ego is being smoldered and being massaged and being approved and validated in such a way that she holds on to that so she doesn't have to meet her own fragility. Maybe in turn, when that goes away, she has to meet the abandonment from her father, or the rejection from her dad, or the grief of never knowing her dad, or the grief of the relationship she never had with her dad. Also, what happens is these blocks run in the quantum field and the ancestral realm. For example, what might happen for a man is maybe you go 4 generations down the lineage. Maybe I go to my great grandfather in the paternal lineage, and maybe what happened there was like a root cause wound with the feminine where his voice was taken away, where 4 generations back in the paternal lineage, the masculine voice was taken away from emasculation from the feminine. Now that trickles down, and it plays out. Now, if that's your story, then that runs 4 generations back. It means you have 4 stories and 4 generations of trauma holding in your body that ensure that you hook and you siphon energy. And now what's actually happening is that core wound of the feminine taking your power away. You're trying to get your needs met from the feminine, but you feel that when you unblock that protection, that you will be hurt, or that you will be emasculated, or that whatever original wound or fragility that lives there, that it won't be protected, it won't be revered, it won't, whatever your partner is, that they won't be devotional to that. They won't be devotional. They'll weaponize it. They'll take advantage of it. So when that runs 4 generations, it means you have 4 generations. If it goes 4 generations back, it means you have 3 previous. So 4 means 3. So it means you have 3 generations holding in your body of stories where your throat, your power was taken away. And so there's cords going to be right here, right from the sacral to the throat. And so what happens with these men is they people please. They don't really say what their truth is. And when a man people pleases, when he doesn't move into his truth and his expression, he's keeping a cord entangled in his sacral energy. He's blocked right here because he fears if he really, really says what's here, that it's going to be weaponized and he's going to be hurt. Because when he really reveals what's here, there's a tenderness, there's a fragility and a vulnerability that gets revealed in that space. This opens and this opens together. throat and the sacral open together. Same thing with a woman. If you have womb trauma, your womb was taken away. That power, it holds right here. It holds right here, right? And so when that runs ancestrally, and now this creates an imbalance between left and right sides of the body, right? And we're trying to move into a somatic balance between both. This is ancestral polarity, but this runs 3 generations back and it holds, and that story persists. And so now we hook energy. We hook energy to keep the ancestral contract in play. And it becomes a way that we actually hold on to our ancestors. And if there's a big T trauma of some abuse of whatever it might have been, then that becomes that much more prolific to hold on to it, because now we're going to have to deal with 3 generations of compounded trauma from that original core wound that the body anticipates. Oh, that's going to swallow me. That's going to take me whole, right? I'm not going to be able to handle that, right? And so what it does is it creates these covert games of manipulation. And what we're ultimately doing is we're fighting against shame. We're fighting against unworthiness. That if my sacral really opens, we're kind of coming back to like the purity of infancy. We're coming back to the purity of infancy. Means your light and your radiance at a time before it became untouched, or when it was untouched, right? And so we're fighting against the fragility, maybe the trauma that lives there. And maybe when that entity moves, we feel the pain. This is why people stay in trauma spirals. This is why narcissists stay in mechanisms of power, because they're fighting against a projected fear or fragility of that original wound being revealed, right? And so when we go there, and so when you feel that deepest unworthiness, everything changes. And now there's sort of this calm sovereignty in your space. And what it really creates for a man is he really knows who he is. He really knows his path. He really trusts it. He trusts the consciousness and the reality that moves through him. And now, and here's the big thing, you guys, as we're sort of getting to the end of sort of this transmission. And this relates to, the question was, how do you tell when you're hooking into someone? So a big part of this is, what's the energy that you engage with, right? So from a very practical point of view, it could be like you're downloading a dating app. Why are you downloading a dating app? Why? Right? You're going on some dates, you're talking to someone. Why are you talking to someone? And really being honest about the energy that's coming through. And we want to get to a place where we're freed up in our energetic body, that we have something to offer. We're freed up in our energetic body, that we have something to offer. And so as a man, it would be, a man will hook and siphon energy from the feminine when he doesn't feel like he has anything to offer. A man will siphon and hook energy and extract from women when he doesn't feel like he has anything to offer. Same thing from a woman to a man. And that's in the exchange of your energy. Or maybe at the end of the day, we're afraid of fully feeling our power. And that runs back to the lineage. It runs back maybe 4 generations when your great-grandfather was emasculated by your great-grandmother. And she plowed him into the fucking ground. And so he lost his voice. And his sacral was blocked as well. And so that's why the stomach and the lower abdomen is so much a part of this. That's the fear that's holding there. Because when that energy drops and transmutes, now you feel your power. You're feeling your offering. You're feeling the depth of what you have to offer and give. We hook when we don't feel like we have anything to offer. And so we hook as a way to resolve, try to get a need met without having to show someone our perceived sense of unworthiness. And when that energy moves, a man will be in the space of the depth of consciousness and power that moves through me. I have so much to offer the feminine. I could rip her wide fucking open with the depths of consciousness that moves through me. And you engage with that energy of, how can I open her and serve her in this sort of greater sort of energy exchange. And as a woman, you're like, God fucking moves through me. God speaks to me. I have this radiant light that moves through me. I could enliven him. I could add something to him. I could, and now you move in this space where you both exchange in a way, in a very pure, unegoic way. I really have something to offer you. And because of that process of realizing my offering, I also feel worthy to receive from you. I deserve to receive from you. I deserve to receive from the feminine because of this process of unlocking that I have done. And now this is where devotion begins. And we're not trying to look for a completion, but we're trying to look for an amplification. How can we amplify? How can we amplify what's already there? And really what that means is that your sacral energy has been freed up. Your sacral energy and your root energy, if I could really break it down somatically, it means that your root and sacral has really began to merge with your crown. When your root and your sacral really begin to merge with your crown, it means you've broken the ancestral contract. You've broken the ancestral contract. You've broken the karmic residue, and you're moving into a space, and your stomach starts to release, and your stomach starts to shift, and energy moves down, and now you're moving to a space that says that it is safe for me to inhabit my power. I am allowed, and I am allowing myself to be in my code, my divine feminine code or my divine masculine code. I'm allowing myself to be there. I am worthy to be there. And now God and the little boy or the little girl sort of start to dance together. And you feel your deepest unworthiness, but you can persevere from that place. And so what's happening right now, and maybe you're noticing this process, collectively, and this is big, guys, because I'm going to tie this all together. When there's a lot of solar activity, the Schumann resonance, and we have solar flares, and you're noticing a lot of the energy is pretty crazy right now. That's a pressure cooker. That energy is it's pressing to birth something. It's pressure to expansion. So when there's enough pressure, eventually something bursts, right? When there's enough pressure, eventually that pressure can't be held anymore, right? And so when there's all this solar activity, all this pressure is coming, and it reveals everything. It's revealing everything from your life and your ancestors, like the deepest threads of unworthiness in your body, so you can come back to a pure union with that little boy or little girl, and recalibrating it at an ancestral level so you can move into the total embodiment of that code. So you can truly move into the embodiment of that code, that I am worthy. I am worthy of this. And so if you're noticing why shit's been so hard, latter half of 2024, moving to 2025, it's because the deepest threads of our fragility, are trying to alchemize. The deepest threads of our fragility are trying to fucking alchemize with the entirety of us, so that we can move into that pure union and sovereignty on our path. Like, this is what's happening at different layers and dimensions to everyone, at some layer. And it just depends for you and your process, where you are, at what level of embodiment maybe this is happening. But this is what's happening, and that's the process. And so when that sacral energy becomes clean, you're now saying, I'm going to allow myself to be in a safe inhabitation of my power and what I really have to offer. And what I really have to offer, it's not infused from ego projection. Maybe along the way, we move into spaces that are led by ego, but you'll notice that your sacral really starts to open when the offering is so pure that it comes from God. You'll notice that the sacral opens when the offering that comes through is so fucking pure, it comes from God. And you can tell the difference. You can tell that difference. And it becomes potent and powerful. And in this space, you magnetize. You magnetize. You're not pulling and hooking and siphoning and extracting, but you're in the full amplification of an offering that you have to give through the energy of source. This is when your cock energy or your womb energy moves straight with source and God. And then eventually what happens is this energy starts to move more through your body, right? Your sacral energy merges with your solar plexus. It merges with your throat. It merges with the face. It merges with the third eye. It merges with the crown. It merges with your heart, right? And now this is why I always say, like, people in the ungrounded spiritual community are always like, God is love. I always say God is integration. God is a complex, nuanced, alchemical integration between all energies of your capacity. That's what God is. It's so complicated, right? If you could relate it in the body, it's when your energy centers begin to flow seamlessly together. That's God, right? And so typically when people are like, God is love, or God, they're saying God is heart chakra. What they're saying is that person hasn't inhabited their sacral energy. They haven't inhabited their root. That's why it's really ungrounded, right? And you feel it in their space. They're like, everything is love and light and all. They haven't inhabited a sacral energy. And what's trying to happen is that sacral energy is trying to alchemically integrate with every center in your body, that you can hold that. That's what we call the divine frequency. That's what we call when your soul is fully alive in you, right? So when your soul is fully alive in you, your body and your vessel is a vehicle for source. It's a vehicle for source. You become merged with God. Your little boy, little girl becomes merged. So it's an integration. It's this complex sort of alchemical integration that happens. And this is where you move into an offering. And so when your sacral energy is this clean, now you're able to move into more of a space of devotion, where you can ask myself, am I really being devoted to this person and this person's energy? Am I operating in the highest caliber of devotion? Is this person and how they're engaging with me, are they operating in the highest caliber of devotion? And you ask yourself, is this energetic exchange even? Is there a give and take, a receive and a reciprocate happening? And that becomes the entry point. And that's how we heal energetic extraction, hooking, and siphoning energy. So I hope that resonated with people. I have fucking pen all over my hand. Speaking of harnessing your little boy, I'm like a little boy at school with fucking pen all over me. But if you guys connected to this, if you're related to this, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone you think might resonate, connect with it. If you guys haven't already, I really, really appreciate if you guys were to subscribe to my channel. That would mean a lot to me. If you do resonate with these lives, when I do go live and what I share, and hope you connect with this. And if you have any questions, you can post them in the comment section of this video, or you can send me a DM on Instagram, anything you want some clarity on or anything that you want me to talk more about in the future. And happy to respond to those. So wishing you all a great weekend. And I'm going to go buy a new vape. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Much love, everyone. And we'll see you soon.